Hi, Christy. Welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad you're here. We got to chat just a little bit about some of the things happening with AI and otherwise, but I know you are, I don't know if you're dubbed this, but I'm going to dub you kind of the person that leads with kindness. And I know that's kind of been where I've heard you on other podcasts. Where did your career start? Maybe tell me where you're from and what your early career was and kind of how you got into the agency that you have now.
Well, I live in Cincinnati and I've been here for more than half my life, so I consider myself from Cincinnati, Ohio. And way back in 1993, I left a corporate job to begin freelance writing, and I did that for probably about 9 years. And then in 2003, I think it was, there was a woman had founded Writer Girl, and she had one very large client, and it was really just that business kind of thing. And I worked with her for a little while, and then that client was indicted for accounting fraud, and
Wow.
she was pregnant with her second child, and she didn't want to do it anymore. So I basically got the name because there wasn't anything there, and started building the business really. And let's see, probably I'm trying to think, fast forward a few years, there was a client that came to me and they wanted a group of writers to do a 1,000-page content management system over an 8-week time span. And so we did that, and they actually compressed the timeline to 6 weeks, and that went really well. And I thought, oh, this is good. I can bring teams of writers to large projects. And then fast forward another, I don't know, 4 to 6 months, and a former client who had moved from her previous job into a marketing director position at a hospital group in the area reached out and needed help on 3 hospital websites that were launching concurrently. And so I knew nothing about healthcare, the hospital industry at all. But like within a week, I had 35 writers on it. And that was a trial by fire, certainly, but learned a lot. It went well. And then I thought, oh, that's what I'll do. I will bring teams of writers um, to hospitals, and that will work. And I told myself the necessary lie that any entrepreneur does, which is it'll be easy. And of course, it was not easy. And nobody in Cincinnati would talk to me. I ended up going to Columbus, Ohio, to the Ohio State University, and spoke with a marketing director there who had recently started. We connected very well and got a very large project from them, and they remain a client to this day. And then now, we work almost every state in the country, and certainly everybody in Cincinnati. I think we work with every hospital in Cincinnati now too.
Oh, wow. How did the team evolve during that time frame? I mean, you were solo when you took over Writer Girl. I mean, how did it build from there?
Yes, I was solo, and then I had for quite.
Hey, Christy,
Yeah, I
I'm
think
I'm
I
so
think. Sorry, we got a
sorry.
little.
Yeah, I this might be on my end. We're having a big storm here right now. Hold on one sec. I'm gonna. All right. So, Christy, when you took over, I'm curious, like how you scaled the team at the beginning and what that was like for you. And did you have a North Star in terms of like where you wanted it to go in terms of, or was it just based on like, okay, we're getting all these clients now, I've got to start building?
Well, I was the breadwinner for my family at the time I was married, and my son was young. And so I was just, as probably anybody in your audience knows, when you're building a business, you kind of wear every hat and you put your head down and you just get the work done, right?
Sure.
So while I was building it, I didn't have any employees, W-2 employees. I had two 1099 people that I worked with, and then that grew and grew and grew. And eventually those two original people became employees. And probably right around that time is when I said to my accountant at the time that if I can't build a business based on kindness, I'll go back to being a freelancer. And so while that was my intention, I didn't focus on it a lot consciously because I was busy building the business. And it wasn't really until about 4 or 5 years ago when we were working with some consultants. And the first thing they did was survey all of the employees and to discover what is the core of our business, the thing without which we would not exist. And it came out that it was our culture. And I thought that's a very interesting thing because a lot of people, it's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people, business owners, would not think of culture as being either revenue generating or having a positive impact on the bottom line. But in my experience, I know that it has. And so it was funny to look back and be like, wow, I did have that intention. And that's actually what happened, because together, the organization several years ago kind of worked together to decide who we are as a group. This was a pretty long time ago, probably 8 to 10 years ago. And our values are that we are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. And then our mission is building relationships one word at a time. And so that kind of encapsulates our culture, and people live that out every day.
That's amazing. When you said you wanted to, operate or start a business from, if you couldn't do it with kindness and you didn't want to do it, what did that mean to you? And was it based on past experience? Like, had you had some like bosses that you could have done without maybe, or like, where did that come from? And what did it mean to you? I mean, did it mean, yeah, just describe that. What did because it is a cultural thing. It's probably a lot
Mhm.
easier for you to describe.
Well, interestingly, I'd had a lot of jobs, even though I wasn't that old at the time, but I left every like couple years or so. I always joke that I am definitely not a millennial, but I behave like one, which is kind of funny. I have a business that works for millennials, but while the organizations themselves, the people were not unkind, I felt like the organization that grew up around the people wasn't terribly kind. And I didn't like that. I thought that it was unnecessary. And I felt like, I don't think I would have articulated this that way 20 years ago. But what I say now is that things like kindness, vulnerability, empathy, all the things that we call soft skills, which are actually the hard ones, that they require both intention and attention. So again, the people weren't, I would not say they were unkind people, but the structure and the organization in which they operated didn't foster kindness. So
Sure.
that was where my impetus came from. And I also think at the time, many things were different about me 20 years ago. And I probably had a lot more insecurities, and I wanted to be everybody's favorite vendor and everybody's favorite client. Now I don't really think about that. We tend to be that because we are a relationship oriented business. That is our mission, and it remains our mission. And the people who work with us notice that and comment on it, because we're not transactional in any way. I say frequently that while we don't know the sandbox in which our clients are playing, we're not people who stand back and tell them they're doing everything wrong. We jump into that sandbox with them and meet them where they are, and then help them solve whatever challenge they're facing.
That's very cool. Now, within your culture, I heard you mention on another podcast, I think you've had like remarkably low turnover within your team,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, we have.
So, and obviously a big part of that is treating people with kindness, showing empathy, being vulnerable as a boss, admitting when you're wrong, getting in the weeds, all those things.
Mhm.
But I also got to imagine it has a lot to do with who you're bringing onto the team, because you can do all those things, but if you're not bringing the right people into the organization, then you're going to have a problem. So what do you guys do, I guess, on the front end to maintain such a like stellar retention rate?
Well, we have pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Pretty rich recruitment processes. Like I always say, we engineer the processes and the structure to allow for the weaving of the magic of the tapestry that is the culture. But so we have pretty rich processes, and I will tell you too. I think that not people who are not um, like us aren't attracted to us. There is
Right.
there is that element, I mean, an organization, I always say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, as if like a person, right? And certain people are attracted to other people, and certain people are attracted to organizations. I personally was never someone attracted to really large corporations. I don't know why. I just wasn't. And so the people who are attracted to work for our organization, WG Content is the name of it. The people who are attracted to work here tend to be people who are interested in the values that we express. Also, they're really interested in the benefits that we offer. It's frequently what happens is a lot of the people that work here then recruit people that they worked with before, or they recruit family members. Two of my friends' daughters work for my organization, which is great. there's 3 people who have been here a very long time, one 13 years, one 12 years, one 9 years. They all work together at another organization. And the one who was here the longest, obviously, she recruited the next one. And then together they recruited the next one. And then we have 3 other people from another organization, all of which are somewhat newer because we added strategy within the last 3 years. And 2 of them are strategists. And the first one came and then brought another one from the organization. And then they together recommended that we hire the former marketing director from that company. So those kind of things happen a lot. And another employee who's been here 10 years, the 12-year employee brought her from, they had worked together elsewhere before. So a lot of it happens very organically that way. And then also what we do is we have upwards of 100 contractors, 1099 contractors that we work with all over the country. And they get to know us pretty well. And frequently they'll end up saying, I really want to be a full-time employee. And if we are looking, that's perfect. Like we just had a situation where we promoted from within. We actually had a position available and we had 6 people apply. And of course, only one could get it. And I'll tell you an interesting story about that. But in any case, then what happened out of the blue, somebody we'd worked with probably 10 years ago, and she had left because she needed a full-time job. And she saw that we were looking for a project manager. She reached back out and she's like, oh my gosh, I'd love to come back. And she even knows the client that she will be working on because she worked with them years ago. So those kind of serendipities happen a lot. But something that I wanted to mention, because this has come up in our organization, and it's very culture oriented. So when we promoted this one person, 5 people did not get the job. So our EVP of operations was going to talk to each of the people who did not get the job prior to announcing it. And she was talking to our HR coordinator, and the HR coordinator was like, oh, that sounds really hard. I think you should send an email. And our EVP has been here, I don't know, I think 9 years or something like that. And she said, no, we do difficult things here. And while it would be much easier for me to send an email, what I'm going to do is speak to each person. Some of these people I've worked with for 10 years, and I'm going to hold the space for the difficult conversation and the feelings and respect that and take the time to actually meet with each person and explain the situation. And so, I always say that it takes longer to build an environment where people can thrive than it would be so much easier to send an email, right? Or so much easier just to tell your team what to do, to give orders than it is to seek, input, things like that. But it makes a huge difference in, as you mentioned, things like turnover, which we have
I
very
love that
little.
example. I mean, I remember one time early in my career, and this was in corporate America. I guess it was early in my corporate career because I was an entrepreneur before and after, but kind of in the middle, I had a corporate experience. And I remember being up for a regional job that I definitely felt I was qualified for. I was working at a local level. I was up for a regional level. It was close. I didn't get it. But my boss was so great in that he let me know exactly why. He let me know where I stood. He let me know what the attributes of the person who got it were. And he told me specifically what I needed to do. And that, hey, my name's in the conversation now. And if you're with the right organization and that organization is growing, it's not like that's it. I think a lot of times when we're up for a promotion or up for a job and we don't get the one we want, we're sort of like, that's it forever. And it's like, no, that's just the end or a pausing of the conversation for now. Right.
Right.
And to be continued later. And so the better question to ask, I think, for those of us in the seat of being promoted maybe is, okay, like what can I do? Like if I know the organization is fair and that they generally make good decisions, even if I don't have to agree with all of them, what do I need to do? Where did I come up
Right.
short? And for the
Right.
bosses, they need to do exactly what you guys did, which is, I think, just be strong. I mean, sending an email is weak, right? I mean, sending an
Right.
email is hiding. And like you said,
Yes.
your VPs worked with some of these people for 8 or 9 years, probably
Yeah.
knows them well, probably knows who their kids are, and all they get when they get turned down for something is an email. I mean, oh, that could be devastating.
Right.
So I'm curious, because you built all this from scratch. You built this from, having not hired people on your own before. What was the most difficult part for you in building your business? Was it cash flow? Was it hiring people? Like, what was
Gosh.
it for you?
Oh boy, there's so many, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were many, many years. And again, if anybody is an entrepreneur listening, they know the fear that you're going to, burn it all down and end up living in a trailer by the river if you're lucky.
Right.
Um, so, there were many, many, many years when I worried about payroll, right? I don't do that anymore. It's been a while since then. But I would say really just as a blanket thing, and I don't know that I would say the most difficult, I would say the most challenging and the most beneficial thing that I've done in building my business was listening to a coach say to me that my organization is me and I am my organization and it won't grow until I do. And so when I heard that, I started a meditation practice every morning. I got up every morning and first thing I did, I meditated. And then I read really books more about personal development than business books, and mostly focusing on self-awareness. And I started studying the Enneagram, which, for those who don't know, is a personality typing system. But the reason that I like it and that we use it is because it focuses on motivation rather than behavior, because behavior can look similar, but why you do a certain thing is different.
Sure.
And so what that does is creates a lot of self-awareness for me personally. When I learned more about the Enneagram, it changed the way I parented. It definitely changed the way I led. And I learned about how to moderate my behavior. We're grown-ups. We should be able to moderate our
Sure.
behavior. And I learned about aspects of my personality that inadvertently would shut other people down. I'm a verbal processor and I process really quickly, which doesn't make me smarter, but it can make me impatient, for people that process more slowly. So I had to really learn to slow down because I want to hear what other people have to say. And I also know that as the leader, I can't give a solution right at the beginning because then nobody else will come up with anything else because they think, oh, well, that's done. So I try to wait until I hear and I invite other voices before saying, what I'd like to do or making a decision. So all of those things, learning to moderate my behavior, recognizing that trust is a long game and that it's so easily lost. To your point, when you talk about somebody who's worked with us for 10 years and didn't get the promotion, how would that feel if it was just an email? I mean, that years of trust building could be blown in one lack of an interaction, right? So learning all of those kind of things about myself and then also leading with that. And trying to be conscious. Of course, I've never done. I'm sure I still do those things, but I try really hard not to do those things. And that's a constant work in progress, right? Isn't it? We're never done. You can't get it wrong and you'll never get it done. That's what I always say.
I love all of that. In fact, the Enneagram, this is something that I did a podcast episode on, had an expert come on,
Really?
tested the whole team, and we talked
Yeah.
about it. We got on a big Zoom call and paired people up, did breakout sessions. What could they learn? How would they change their behavior? And yeah, I think it's really cool. I'm guessing our styles are very similar because when you're talking about some of your modifications, I'm like, yeah, that all kind of rings true here too.
But you
So
gotta tell me what's your Enneagram type?
yeah, so I pulled it up while we're sitting here. If you saw my eyes darting, I like wanted to bring it up. So my strongest one is an 8. So like an 8-3,
Mm-hmm. So
right in there.
yeah, for people that don't know, the Enneagram is like a triangle, sort of like a Star of David almost, with these pieces that go through it. And so what happens is like a triangle will have 8 at the top, 3 on one angle. And I can't remember what the other one is with the 8, 3.
I have like a 1, very
Yeah,
strong 1.
831 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that you move between those. I'm a 7. And so mine is 7, 4, and 1. And so you move between those in your behaviors, depending on where you are, really more emotionally. Like if I'm in a place where I'm not feeling good about myself, I move to the 1, which is called the judge. And I can be very harsh on myself, very, very critical, so it's really interesting to know about it. And what I find interesting about it is we do day-long workshops on it. Sometimes we do lunch and learns and things. And that what it does in my experience is that once you've learned about yourself, you also get to learn about your coworkers. And because you're looking at the motivation, their why,
Yeah.
without even meaning to, you've just laid the groundwork for radical empathy. Because
Absolutely.
instead of looking at their behavior and being like, oh, they're doing this to offend me, they're like, oh, no, they just want it to be right. They think there's a right and a wrong way of doing it. And they're just passionate about that and it has nothing to do with me, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, we all look at everything through our own model of the world, right? So when someone's not going at our pace, at our, whether that's slow, whether that's fast, whether that's in the, it doesn't matter. It's just our model of the world is that's how it should work, right? And
Mhm.
so when you actually learn and go, oh, well, okay, they're not slow, they're just wired different, right? Or they're not
Correct.
fast, they're just wired different necessarily. Or they're
Mhm.
not trying to offend me, they're not trying to, yeah. And I think it's really, really good. And I think it's critical. I mean, if you want to, you can sometimes get data on people that, like you said, you've worked with for years, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? It's
Mhm.
like all the dots start connecting. So I really
Yeah.
encourage, leaders to do that first with yourself, right, to find out how you can be more effective. Um, awesome. So tell me, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. You and I just started talking, and I was like, okay, I don't want to talk about this too much before we hit record. But I've talked to a lot of people lately about AI. I've had experts on the Leaders Lab. Our main business is actually talent acquisition. We put leaders into positions with both corporate and private clients. But um, you know, we're leaning into AI a lot in what we do for various things. If someone said, like, what industries do I think are going to be disrupted, and I don't know what I'm talking about other than kind of a layman that has a podcast that's talked to a few AI guys, but I'm like, well, writing's one of them, right? I mean, we've
Oh
had AI in the background doing stuff forever, feeding us advertising,
my
doing all
gosh.
kinds
Yeah.
of things. But now all of a sudden, like you were saying before the show with Chat GPT, we're like, oh, it can actually write, right? We can give it
Mhm.
commands and it can spit something out.
Yeah.
How has that impacted you guys, if at all, so far? Has it hurt your revenue? Are people like, hey, we're going to take stuff in house because we don't need as many copywriters? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
So far, it has not impacted our business. But as I told you before the show, we do such highly custom content that on the one hand, it also makes it more challenging to scale, right? Because you've got a lot of arms and legs there. It's not a platform, and I don't want it to be a platform. So there's that. But then on the other side, it kind of protects us somewhat from being replaced by a robot. One of the things that I say frequently, and actually I just read about it, was saying that a robot cannot dream, wish, or imagine, right? They can't do that. And that is the differentiator between us and a robot. So for us, we do have an AI champion at our organization, learning about it, trying to figure out how does it make sense for us to use it, how as a tool, right? Not to replace the writing, but where does it fit in a way that makes sense? Also, some of what we work right now in the healthcare space with a lot of hospital organizations, big hospital systems, and then people also who provide services to hospitals and healthcare organizations. And several of our clients have said, we do not want you using any AI at all. Others are a little more curious and, we can kind of play around with it. We would never generate an entire piece of content using AI. We might use it as a starter document. We might even
Right.
ask it to give us questions to ask for some kind of interview. But, again, one of the things that differentiates us is, for example, when we do, let's say, even a physician bio or a patient story, the writers conduct interviews with those people. And one of the things that the writers do when they're speaking, interviewing, is they don't just have a list of questions. They're engaging, much like we are, in a conversation. And really, one of the things that we specialize in is being able to discern when sharing a little bit of yourself as the interviewer, being a little bit vulnerable, allows that person to open up and be a little more vulnerable. And it might lead you down a different path than where you originally thought you were going to go. And that's where you get the golden nuggets, and that's where you get the stories that actually can bring a tear to your eye, and all of those human elements that make healthcare what it is, right? So,
Right.
I'm not saying that it won't have an impact, but I think that we can both agree that by the time this conversation is over, AI will have changed again.
Sure.
It's so rapidly changing; it's so hard to stay on top of, and I think it's both wonderful and awesome, and also terrifying. I really don't know where that's going to go.
To me, I mean, what I see with it and kind of how we're engaging with it is I see it as a tool, right? It's
Mhm.
not the end all be all. It's a tool. Like, I mean, literally like a vacuum cleaner is a tool, like your computer is a tool. It's you have to deploy it. You have to tell it what to do. You have to ask it really good questions if you want really good answers. It's not going to replace what you guys are doing because that's not what they're looking for. If you could be replaced, it sounds like in what you were doing by that, then you wouldn't actually be doing your job because it's almost like anyone could write it, right? Like, and
Correct.
so it has to be done like through skill. We use it sometimes for things like it's good for job descriptions as an example, but
I
again,
could
I
see
have
that.
to feed it
Absolutely.
but I have to feed it, right?
Mhm.
It's a machine. I have to feed it. I have to,
Yeah.
so I still have to interview the client and I still have to say what would make a great match for this team beyond just what I see on your website. What are
Yes.
you guys looking for? What are some of the nuances, right? And then I can feed the utility to make it happen. The other ways that we've used it is whenever I see something that is a task repeated over time and
Mhm.
time again. It's like, we're loading people onto a spreadsheet, or
Yeah.
we're moving them from this piece of software to that. There's different things that it can jump in and help with. So that part's been good. So where are you in your business journey now in terms of the future? Are you guys still scaling up? Are you still growing? Do you have, are you a person that sets kind of business goals 5 years out, or is it more personal goals at this point, or what are you looking for? And it sounds like the organization's gotten big enough to where you're probably not in the weeds every day, probably more on the visionary and leadership side, I would think,
Yes.
based on what I heard on other shows. But yeah, kind of tell me where you're at with things.
Yeah, I definitely very much work on the business as opposed to in the business. I'm really fortunate. I have an amazing team of people who work on the day to day. And we recently went through a rebrand, changing the name of the organization to more fully represent who we are. So we were originally Writer Girl for 20 years. And people like the people we worked with, at the marketing director level, they knew the things we offered. But when we got to our contacts, like the chief marketing officer, even VPs or CEOs, they're like, wow, we had no idea that you did all of that. So we're like, I think it's time. It's time for us to, grow up a little bit and name ourselves something that more fully represents who we are and the services we offer. So we are WG Content Strategy and Creation. So we've gone through that rebranding, which has been, a huge undertaking internally, a lot of people working on that. I think that also positions us to move into other industries because we are well known as the gold standard within our industry. But if we choose to move into another vertical, we can, do that with a broader name and broader scope of services that the name that more accurately reflects the broader scope of services. In terms of growth, I have never, even when I was building the business, I never was like, oh, I want to get to 1 million. I know that a lot of people feel that way, and I never really did. In fact, I was surprised when it happened. I think I remember my accountant calling me, and I was like in a cell phone store, and she was like, oh, we just passed 1 million. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool.
Sure.
But I think in terms of what I see, I'm again the visionary. My main focus always is the organization, building the environment where people can thrive. And as we grow, ensuring that we hold on to that, because I'm sure you've experienced this and most of us have. I think I can say that about where I used to work. It wasn't that there were unkind people, but the intention of the organization wasn't kindness. And so I really keep an eye on that. Like we just redid our tech stack. And as anyone knows, that can be a huge ordeal when you're changing things, right? Change is hard, technology is hard. You throw them two together and there will be tears, So,
Yeah.
so, um, so things like that we've done are huge investments for us to take us forward. When we do something like that, I always say, make sure that it's going to be good for 5 to 7 years. So we're not reinventing the wheel later on down the road. I think that for me, I plan to keep working. I don't see any reason not to. I'm not someone who focuses only on the bottom line. Obviously, I do look at that. We are a for-profit organization, but I do, as my upcoming book is called Your Cultural Balance Sheet, look very much at the organization through the lens of culture as opposed to simply the balance sheet. So like when it came to the tech stack, we did it more slowly. We did a full day workshop around change, using the Enneagram as our tool. We gave people a lot of time. We actually set up a kind of an ombudsman internally to answer questions so people knew in real time they could get help. So as I've said before, doing things with culture in mind takes a lot longer and probably costs a bit more than it would if you just did it. But I want to continue doing that. So that's always, what I'm looking at. I spend a lot of my day reading, listening, learning, a big focus on my own personal development, which then how can I feed that into the organization? How can I constantly be feeding into the well-being of the people who work here? Because I think you probably heard me say this, but that there's just like there's no such thing as business ethics, there's no such thing as personal development versus professional development.
Right.
You are an entire human. And if you grow personally, obviously it impacts your work performance. So I really keep an eye on that. That's my focus. And it's my legacy. It's my privilege to lead an organization of these brilliant, creative, innovative, committed people. And I fully appreciate them giving their genius to this organization. And we want to feed back into their lives in a meaningful way, more than just financially. We want to do that as well.
I really like that. I mean, so for you, it really sounds like grow myself, focus on growing myself, focus on team growth, harmony, culture, things like that. Financial results are really a byproduct of long-term financial results are really a
Yes.
byproduct of doing those things.
Yes, very much so, very much so. And I have a couple other things. I have the audacious goal of reinventing the way people look at the world of work. And so I think, well, how can I do that? How can I put wings to those words? And so I have a couple different ideas for another business to start to see if I can create a bunch of kind of a groundswell of people, if you will, changing the way they lead through self-awareness, personal development, and then having that positive impact on the organizations or teams that they lead. Much like you were in corporate America, it sounds like you had a really wonderful boss
Mm-hmm.
that, led in a meaningful, helpful, good culture way. And so really deliberately setting up ways to help people do that. So I'm thinking about various ways to do that.
Maybe on the back of your book, when is that coming out? Do you have a date
Hopefully
yet?
summertime, that's the
Cool.
plan. My co-author also works in the organization. She has been responsible for writing all the content for the new website. And so she's been rather busy. So we're circling back on that shortly. And we're pretty far down the field. So we're hoping to have something done this summer.
Has there ever been a point? I mean, I guess not lately because it sounds like financially you guys have done well, but there had to have been times early on where you hit a crossroads where there's there's the need for cash flow and there's
Yeah.
the I don't want to say ethical, but the dilemma of, hey, but we've got, like right now it's easier for you to go, let's take
Mhm.
this slow, let's do a 1-day Enneagram workshop, let's make sure everybody's okay with the change that we're going to make, because you
Mhm.
guys have the financial resources, the size of team to be okay with that, right? To be like, no, this is going to work and we'll take the little bit of hit this month and next month we'll make up for it because we'll have the new
Mhm.
system in. But when you're a 2, 3, 4, 5 person shop back in the day that's struggling to pay your bills, that's a little tougher, right? I mean, were you always able to kind of stay true to that mission of just like, if I just err on the side of culture, it's always going to work out?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I share with people when they say, what was, a challenge that you faced? And I studied French in college, so I did not have a business background. I really didn't. I
Okay.
mean, I obviously understand it and that, but I didn't have the language of business many years ago. And I did not understand the difference between cash and accrual accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Magic, you need to understand that. You
Yeah.
probably do. A lot of people do. I did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through a divorce, and the business was on a cash basis because we collect a large amount of cash up front, and then we work it off. Much better suited for an accrual-based accounting system than cash. But when I got divorced, I was on a cash basis, and so I ended up paying spousal support when if I had been on an accrual basis, I would not. And I realized it right after I had settled this, and I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I made sure that I didn't want my ex to be able to come back and ask for more money, which also meant I could never reduce it. So it's like it was cast in stone. You have to pay this for 4 years. That's it. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? I did this based on something completely wrong. It was like, so that was a horrible mistake. It was scary. It was really scary. When I realized this, I was like, oh my gosh, am I going out of business here? What have I done?
Mhm.
But I also always said, and I firmly believed it, and I still would believe it to this day. At that time, I was like, I will cash out my retirement account for this business
Mhm.
before I will like let anybody go. And even when we were much smaller, the woman who's now my EVP, we didn't actually, she had been a contractor with us. And she had been on a contract with us, like as opposed to just, time to time, she was like a certain amount of time a month. And she had left and gone for another job and very disappointed. A year later, came back and was like, I really made a mistake. I'd like to work with you guys. And we didn't really have a position for her at the time, but I knew I wanted her. I'd wanted her for years. And I said, come work here. We're going to make up something for you. We didn't really have anything that was billable. So I put her in charge of something we call our academy, which is our LMS, learning management system training that we make all of our associates go through. And so she developed all of that, which was of course unbillable time. And so it was an expense. It was a pretty big expense because I got insurance because she needed insurance, paid her a good salary, and it was right around the time I was getting a divorce. So all of this stuff was going on. I was like, okay, I have a retirement account, and if I need to, I will access that. And I don't think I know I never did that. I'm trying to think. I think we might have accessed the line of credit, which at the time was not very much, maybe once or twice and paid it right back. So it was more of a timing issue as opposed to really a cash flow issue. But boy, I know when you're running, you feel like you're running close to the bone. And when you're really working hard and building and still kind of wearing many hats as opposed to being able to do what I do now, it is challenging. But I think I tell people that other entrepreneurs that I coach other entrepreneurs and I say, what you're doing is hard. Not many people even try it, much less succeed at it. So give yourself a break there. And I honestly, in my own experience, I believe that I have a true belief in something that is then attracted to me because I'm so aligned with where I know it's going to go and what I believe is going to happen,
Yeah.
that it doesn't happen overnight and it doesn't make the gauntlet that you run simple. But I'm quite aware of the fact that this is going to be that. I knew that this organization was going to be something much bigger than I could ever do on my own. Now, that said, also because I focus on culture, I don't have these, I'm like not growing 20% a year. And my EBITDA isn't something that I would worry about in terms of selling because that's not my exit strategy right now. So I'm not as concerned about that now. And I never was, even when I was building it. I frequently say I've never done anything for money, but the money has come. And I believe it's because I do things I'm passionate about. I am passionate about the people that work for this organization. The tasks that they perform, I'm amazed by their skill. I couldn't do any of it now. But that's just part of it. The thing I'm more amazed by is their humanity and their willingness to be vulnerable with one another and to really bring, their full selves
Yeah.
to this organization. That humbles me, and it's a privilege.
Oh, that's so cool. The thing the word that I was thinking of when you were talking about that, it being kind of back up against the wall with your ex-husband and with this new hire that you really, what am I doing? There's in those moments, it's like you're going to have one of two emotions, and probably a little bit of a mix of both, but you're going to lean heavy towards either faith or fear. And all I could think of is like, you just had faith. So it was like,
Mhm.
if we dip into the line of credit, we're dipping into the line of credit. It's temporary. Like, we know where we're going. I know who I'm hiring. I know who I have on the team. I know what my own abilities are. We have clients. Like, it's all gonna be just fine. Does it look great on paper right now? No. Do I want to dip into a credit line? Absolutely not. But it is what it is, right? But
Mhm.
I think if you're not confident in your team, if you're not confident in where you're going, if you hadn't built the culture you were building there, then maybe the decision becomes a lot more short term and protective, right?
Mhm.
Let's not
Yeah.
hire the girl. Let's sue my ex, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it becomes much
Right.
more defensive than
Mhm.
operating from a place of where you know the outcome, even if it's not going to happen today or tomorrow or next week. At some point, it's
Mhm.
going to come if you do the right things.
Yeah, that's been my experience. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's kind of close out on that. I really love that thought. And anything else for our our audience before we get going with you? It's been great chatting with you.
Oh gosh, I think I really do think, especially because I go in cycles, probably like a lot of people, where I mean, I know meditation is good, and at our organization, any meeting with more than 3 people starts with the meditation. So I'm like enforcing this with everybody else, and then I forget about it. So I'm back in a stage where I've started my meditation practice again, and I have to do it first thing in the morning before I even get dressed, or else I will be distracted by myriad things, right? So I will say for me, one of the most meaningful things in my life has been that meditation practice and the work of self-awareness that, if you're doing it right, is challenging, probably some of the hardest work you'll ever do, and also the most meaningful, because I'm a firm believer in the unexamined life is not worth living, right? Doesn't mean you dwell, but you examine. And it enriches your experience of your life, whether you're building a business, whether you're working in an organization, whether you're a parent leading your family, it doesn't matter. It's embracing your full humanity through self-awareness and personal development, really.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's definitely worked for you. Thanks so much for sharing your story with our audience, and it's so good to meet you. Please drop me an email when your book's coming out, and we'll make sure to promote that as well.
Will do, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.